But right now, let's welcome back John Hiner and our next guest, U.S. Senate candidate Terri Lynn.
Good evening, Terri. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I just warned her backstage that the last person to stand between us and the food in the bar. So, but we will do this justice, though.
There you go.
Well, thank you again for joining us. The person that you are running to replace, of course, has written a long chapter in Michigan and U.S. history in his service in Congress, in the Senate. In what ways would you emulate retiring Senator Carl Levin, and in what ways do you think you would differ from him, both in a political approach and also in a personal approach?
Well, I do want to thank Senator Levin for his years of service for Michigan. He definitely contributed a lot, and I thank him for that service, and I wish him best in retirement. I had the opportunity to work with him when I was Secretary of State and as a county clerk with different types of issues that affected our state and our county and our community. And one of the things that I worked with him on is actually the enhanced driver's license. When I was Secretary of State, that was right after 9/11, and security went up, and it was a little bit of a challenge to get to Canada. And of course, a lot of folks go to Canada for lunch, literally. And we wanted to make sure that business continued across the border. So we came up with the enhanced driver's license, where the driver's license was basically a citizenship card. So we needed to get approval from the Department of State to make sure that we could make this work for Michigan citizens. So I met with Senator Levin, I met with Senator Stabenow, our congressional delegation, a lot of other folks in Washington, and we were able to achieve that. He was very supportive. I always appreciated that. And that's one of the things that I think Senator Levin really was very attuned to, is Michigan citizens and making sure that he listened to them, and he did. And we got the enhanced driver's license in Michigan, which I think has been wonderful for commerce and for individuals. Obviously, I'm a little more conservative than Senator Levin is, so we do differ on a few issues as far as that goes. But again, I'd just like to thank him for his service and appreciate all he's done for Michigan.
Mm-hmm. He carved out quite a niche in national security, defense. What policy areas do you feel you're the strongest in, or you'll have a ken for in Congress? Well,
one of the things that the Senator Levin and I do disagree on, and that's Obamacare. I support repealing and replacing Obamacare. Over 225,000 families in Michigan have lost their health care, lost their plan, lost their doctor. It's just not working. It's been a disaster. I want to repeal and replace it with a program that works for Michigan citizens. You need to have transparency. You know what the costs are going to be. You want to make sure that you can buy it with pre-tax dollars like businesses can. You want to purchase it across state lines so you can keep it competitive and keep the cost down. And you want to make sure that you keep that doctor-patient relationship. When you're going through a long-term health care issue, so many of us know a friend or a family member that's had cancer. That's really critical and important that you have that relationship so you can get healthy again. So I would repeal and replace Obamacare with something that will work for Michigan voters. Senator Levin supported that. Congressman Peters, my opponent, also did that, and President Obama did. They all said that if we had our plan, we could keep it. If we liked it, we could keep our doctor and the costs would go down. We all know that's not true. So that would be definitely one issue.
Do you consider that your first priority? And if it is, do you think that there's enough momentum behind the opposition to Obamacare right now to get any significant headway towards a repeal?
Well, the reason I'm running for the United States Senate is that Washington is broken and now it's trying to break Michigan. I want to put Michigan first, and my Michigan First plan includes good jobs, good paying jobs here in the state, and that's what we need. Governor Snyder is working hard to do that as the comeback state, but he needs some help in Washington, D.C. So what I'd like to do is go down there and balance that budget, which is number one priority, eliminate the deficit, reduce the debt. That is going to help our state. That's going to help our country. I have 2 kids. I don't want to leave that debt and that burden to them. And then on top of that, we need to work and make sure that businesses can be successful. And that's to make sure that they have a low, fair tax rate. We want to make sure that they don't have regulations that are burdensome to them, and one of those big regulations is Obamacare. You know, the Senate is at a situation right now where you have Senator Harry Reid, who's not let any bill come up from the House. There's over 400 of that. Think about that. 400 bills in Congress that have not seen the light of the day in the Senate. You know, Senate, it's the great deliberative body, and they haven't deliberated much. We need to make sure that those bills are, you know, debated and talked about in the Senate. That's not done with Senator Harry Reid, and my opponent, Congressman Peters, would just be there supporting Harry Reid and not getting that done.
Clearly, you cite Obamacare as detrimental to Michigan. What else is breaking Michigan, in your words, than beyond Obamacare at a federal policy level?
Well, it's the energy policy. We want to make sure that we have an energy policy that makes our country secure. We want to have low-cost, affordable energy for our manufacturers and for the folks who live here. That's why I do not support the new EPA regulations. Would basically put the pedal to the metal on, you know, energy cost. You know, I'm a conservative. You know, I want clean air. I want a good place to live, and we need to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. There's no doubt about that. And the utility companies are doing that right now. But this is the challenge. This would increase the cost in Michigan, and that at a time we can least afford it. We have industry that needs low-cost energy. Individuals need to be able to heat their homes and have utilities that are affordable. And these new EPA regulations would not do that. That would hurt Michigan's comeback at this time. Also, the EPA is overregulating in other areas. You know, agriculture is a huge part of our state. It's a huge industry. I'm proud to be supported by the Farm Bureau of Michigan, the Cattlemen's Association, and where their new regulations would literally take a puddle and regulate it. The new Waters of the USA proposal that they have, you know, it used to be that they just, the EPA regulated navigable waters, but this would literally navigate a puddle. And if you were a cattleman, you'd have to talk to the EPA about moving your cattle across your fields. And that's just not going to help Michigan business here in our great state. So those are some of the regulations with Obamacare that I see that would hurt Michigan businesses.
You mentioned energy policy. Should Michigan utilities be doing more to produce quote-unquote clean energy from renewable sources?
As I mentioned, I'm for all the above energy policy. As long as we have options, I think that's important because we need to have energy security in this country, which is another reason why I support the Keystone Pipeline. That definitely will give us energy security in our great country and affordable, low-cost energy. But I'll tell you, the utility companies are working very hard. They've reduced greenhouse gases by over 15%. They're looking at their older plants, and they have a procedure to close them down over time. But again, going back to these new EPA regulations, that would again put the pedal to the metal and really force them to have to close them early and not for their full lifespan, which would increase utility cost at a time we can least afford it. You know, my number one priority is good paying jobs in this great state, and that's what I'm going to go down to the U.S. Senate and fight for.
Before we move to the economy or other issues, I just want to close with climate. Do you believe climate change is a problem? And can you explain your position on climate change?
Yes, I believe there is climate change, that humans do affect the climate. And we need to make sure we have clean air and reduce carbon emissions. There's no doubt about that. But we also need to do it in a logical way that we can make sure that it doesn't hurt Michigan industry at a time we can least afford it. You know, Michigan went through some dark days with Governor Granholm and Congressman Peters' policies here in Michigan. We lost over 800,000 jobs. We're on the comeback, but we need to make sure that we have regulations that work for Michigan. You know, it's important that when you're in the U.S. Senate that you put Michigan first, and these policies do not do that. We need to have good paying jobs in this state.
To this point, why has your campaign avoided debates and limited your exposure to the press? Although you're here today, thank you.
I'm here.
Don't voters deserve? Don't voters of Michigan deserve to have as much information about the candidates as possible and see them articulating their views with their opponent?
That's correct. In fact, you and I talked a little earlier how I was at the Detroit News editorial board the other day, and one of the questions they asked me is that, how have you seen politics changed over the last 30 years? And I said, well, for one, nobody does editorial boards anymore, and they're the last ones to do that. You know, I've been out and about as Secretary of State. I was out all the time, met a lot of voters. We're out and about talking to people. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we answer questions, we're out and about. In fact, Tom's taken my picture more than once out in many parades around this great state. As far as the debates go, we have appointed a negotiator, Richard McCullen. He's met, and they're working on that, and I'll leave that up to those folks to make those decisions on the debate. So that's where we are in that, and I'm always willing to talk to you, John, and glad to be here today.
And a point of clarification, this is our editorial board interview, and you have the editors from all of our 10 markets across the state are here today, and other members of our editorial board. So thank you. Democrats are saying that you're trying to rewrite history about the auto bailout by saying that you would have supported it. But no one has been able to find that position on record. In 2012, you were quoted as saying you supported Mitt Romney's anti-bailout position. So where have you settled on the issue of the auto bailout?
Well, I've always had the same position. The Democrats are wrong. I felt it was important to support the auto industry. You know, I had a lot of support from the auto industry when I was Secretary of State. I worked very closely with the manufacturers and had support from thousands of auto workers in our great state. I felt that it was important to maybe look at private financing. When that was not available, we had to do something rather than do nothing. We need to protect our auto industry here in this great state. As I mentioned, Governor Granholm and Congressman Peters, during those dark days of Michigan where we lost 800,000 jobs. That did not work well for Michigan and Michigan's auto. And my opponent, Congressman Peters, he actually voted for a $500 million taxpayer loan to build cars overseas. The company went bankrupt. A Chinese company bought it. Let me tell you, that's not supporting Michigan auto industries. That was during the time of those dark days in Michigan. I would support using taxpayer dollars here in Michigan to build cars here in Michigan. So that's where I am. I support the auto industry, and it needs to grow. Detroit put America on wheels, and we need to make sure we can do that again.
You talk about the comeback of Michigan. It is through the prism of the auto industry. A few years into the recovery, some research that was done by the University of Michigan showed that almost all of the job gains or the economic activity came from the auto industry. Do you believe that it was just a basis of cyclical economic activity through the auto industry, or do you believe Michigan's really diversified itself under the political policies to become more of an economic balanced state?
You know, we have, the agriculture industry likes to think they're a large industry in the state, and of course tourism also. We have 3 large industries in our state, and when I go down to the U.S. Senate, I'm going to make sure I support all 3 and everything in between. Agriculture in Michigan, you know, we have more diverse products in agriculture than any other state other than California. We need to make sure that we have markets for free and fair trade across the globe to sell our products. Tourism is huge. That's why it's so important that we protect our Great Lakes. In fact, I support the governor in his bringing together the consortium of states in Canada to make sure that we keep our Great Lakes pure and pristine and no invasive species, and make sure that Canada doesn't put any nuclear waste next to Lake Huron. I support the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. I think it's very important that we continue to have the beautiful state that we have here. And then, of course, the auto industry, as you mentioned. But in order for the auto industry to be successful in the future, it's very important that we make sure that we have lower and fairer and simpler taxes, that we encourage skilled trades here in Michigan. One of our proposals is that we have the ability to have students who want to go into a skilled trade to be able to get loans the same way a student would get a loan if they went into college. That's one of our Michigan First plans. We think that would help the auto industry and manufacturing and tool and die shops in Michigan. I'm also proposing that we give incentives to businesses so that veterans who are very skilled in a trade and their spouses are able to get good paying jobs in the state. You know, as Secretary of State, one of the things I did was consolidate, take programs that didn't work and eliminate them, take programs that did work and expand them. And I think there's a lot of that in the jobs training program that we could do. There's some that are outdated and antiquated. They just don't work anymore. And more importantly, it's important that businesses have the opportunity to collaborate with educators to make sure that they train the students in the skilled trades that they need in their businesses. So I think all of that put together will make sure that we have a great economy here in Michigan and a great place to live.
You've mentioned tax policy several times now. So what elements of tax reform do you think are necessary priorities going to Washington? And would they or could they include a flat rate tax system?
Well, you know, in order to grow our economy here, we need a lot of things. Making sure that we have taxes that are fair and predictable and low is important. You know, I did a bus tour, because I'm out there doing a bus tour. And we met with a lot of businesses, whether it was tool and die or retail or small businesses or large. And one of the things that I heard from businesses all across this great state is that they needed to have predictability. They even said, you know, just make a decision. And that again goes back to Harry Reid in the Senate, who hasn't taken up over 400 bills in Congress right now to deal with some of these issues, whether it's tax policy, the economy, the environment. And they just want predictability. Have a tax code that'll be 5 to 10 years, so I know what I need to plan for. One gentleman told me, he says, I go to the accountant about every other week just to find out what's going on in the tax code. That doesn't help Michigan businesses. And then on top of that is regulations. You know what the new regulations are. That doesn't help Michigan business. So putting those all together will help Michigan business to be productive.
I'm going to switch gears and go to some larger policy issues. What do you think the best policy is regarding gun control at the federal level?
Well, I'm supported by the NRA, the National Rifle Association. I support the Second Amendment. I believe that people should be able to legally, be able to legally have bear arms. But I'll tell you one of the issues that I think is important, and that's the mental health issues. We do not have enough resources right now to help those folks who are dealing with mental health issues. I'm on the board of Michigan Protection Advocacies. I got on that after I became Secretary of State, and they deal with a lot of those types of issues, and my heart is very much there for that. There's a lot of families right now that are dealing with children or family members that need mental health services, and it's just not available. The resources aren't there. We need to commit to that, and that would be a priority of mine in the United States Senate, is to make sure that the federal government supports those programs, not only at a federal level, but with states and local community health organizations, and I think that's where we should focus.
Would you be open to any expanded kinds of registration, waiting periods, or bans on certain types of guns or ammunition?
When I was Secretary of State, one of the proposals that I had with the concealed weapons permits, having been a local county clerk with the local gun board, is I felt a good option might be is that in the renewal process for the concealed weapons permits is that they would be done at a statewide level, so that you'd have access to statewide background checks and making sure that that was covered statewide. And then that way it'd make it a lot easier to be able to have connections with other states, so you could do that with the concealed weapons permits. Unfortunately, the legislature didn't take up my idea, but I still think it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Should the U.S. deport illegal immigrants? Should there be a pathway to citizenship, or does that equate to amnesty? Please explain your position on immigration reform.
Well, first and foremost, the immigration system needs to be reformed. It does not work. As I mentioned, when I did the enhanced driver's license, I had the opportunity to work with the Department of State. It's antiquated, its systems are old, and it's not in the 21st century, let me tell you. So we need to take and update that system so the folks who want to come here legally, whether it's H-1B visas or green cards, and make sure the system works for them. I've talked to a lot of folks across Michigan, and they're still waiting for their status years later. This is not a way to do it. We need to make the system work for those folks who want to come here legally. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, and I'll tell you, it hurts my heart with these children that have come across this border. President Obama has basically told them they could come here legally. He needs to let them know that that's not the way it works here. We need to get these children back to their parents. We need to put as much resource and time into making sure that happens. Now, if some of these children are here on the refugee status, they're welcome to go through that process, and we should make sure that that happens. But we need to get these children back to their parents. I support securing the border. I think it's important that U.S. Border Patrol has the resources it needs for Border Patrol agents. We need to give them the highest tech equipment that they need in order to secure the border, and we need to work on the fence at the border. So I think if we take all these things together, we can have a secure border.
Governor Snyder has articulated at least some part of the immigration question to an economic issue for Michigan as well, too, inviting people here who fill needs or skill sets that Michigan could use to transform its economy. Is there a way to balance the economic aspects of immigration and the social and cultural aspects?
Oh, definitely. You know, my grandfather came over from the Netherlands when he was 3. I'm from an immigrant family, and a lot of folks, I'm sure, in this audience are. Immigrants built this nation. They start businesses. They're part of the growing economy, and I think it's very important. And that's why I also support increasing the number of H-1B visas and green cards here in Michigan. I think it's a very important part of what we do. But again, if we do that, we got to have a system that works. The Department of State has got to modernize. We have to make sure that these people are able to get through the system and know their status so they can, you know, continue living here. And it's just very important that we modernize the system.
Mm-hmm. What is your view of how President Obama has handled the situation in Iraq, in Syria, with the emergence of the terror threat led by ISIS?
Yes, ISIS is a terrorist organization. It has to be stopped. The president has not led on this. He even volunteered that himself, that he's leading from behind. He called the ISIS the JV team. This is a very serious situation, and we must take it seriously. The president needs to come up with a plan, a clear and concise plan, and a long-term plan. And it needs to involve, you know, talking to your generals, talking to the military, making sure you have all the information to make a good decision, and then he needs to bring it to Congress, and Congress needs to vote on it.
Mm-hmm. How about you personally? We're in the longest and most expensive war in American history by far in Afghanistan. This opens another front in the Middle East. What's your view on expanding the conflict or America's commitment to policing that part of the globe?
Well, you know, part of the reason that we've had this issue with ISIS in Iraq is because the president never signed a status of forces agreement or left troops there to help train the Iraqi citizens and military so they could protect their border. And this just left it open for ISIS to come in, and that's the situation we have today. So no matter where it is in the world, the president has to lead. I mean, the president has to come up with a plan. He has to understand that this is a long-term issue. He has to bring that plan to Congress, and Congress needs to vote on it.
Are you willing to work with President Obama and Democrats from across the aisle? What, if any, common ground do you see between the two parties?
Well, as Secretary of State, I had Governor Granholm as my governor and a Democrat legislature, and during that time we were able to put in the election reforms that we have today. We were able to modernize the office. We were able to do the reforms we did in the Secretary of State's office, and including the enhanced driver's license, which is a very bipartisan program that we did. I've worked with everyone. You know, I think it was Tip O'Neill who said you can get anything done as long as you don't need to take credit for it. And I think we've got a lot to do. First and foremost is Senator Harry Reid has to take up with the 400 bills that are in Congress, bring them to the Senate, and we need to vote on them.
The governor, when he was up here, we spoke about Detroit and the emergency manager and his view of how that has gone, the bankruptcy proceedings. What's the solution beyond that? Once the emergency manager's gone and life goes on in Michigan and in Detroit, what's the solution for bringing Detroit back in the larger region?
Detroit is critical to Michigan. I love the city of Detroit. I've spent a lot of time there. When I became Secretary of State, the first office that we modernized was right down in New Center in Detroit. I took that as a priority when I was Secretary of State. The governor saw what was happening there, made the decision for the emergency manager, which I support, and which we've seen today. The whole community has come together. Not only the nonprofits, but the autos, and even the state of Michigan has contributed to helping the city of Detroit get back on its feet. It's great what's going on downtown Detroit. A lot of people ask me about that. I tell them we have a Starbucks in Detroit downtown. This is cool. And I'll tell you, for a city that size, not to have one was pretty shocking when you tell other folks about that. The good news is Dan Gilbert is down there renovating buildings. The Illiches are putting in their new arena there. A lot of good things are happening in Detroit. A lot of people are investing. Very excited about what's happening there. I want to support Detroit as any way I can, and look forward to doing that in the U.S. Senate.
What other issues that are Michigan specific will you bring to Congress and fight for?
Well, we talked about quite a few. Good paying jobs is most important. I want to go down there and make sure that Michigan continues on its success, and so that we have good paying jobs. I want to make sure we balance that budget, eliminate the deficit and reduce the debt, and do not leave that burden to our children. We need to have good roads here in Michigan, and we didn't talk about that, but my plan on roads would be to leave the federal tax dollars here in Michigan and let the state decide how they want to spend the money. Michigan has the situation that is worse than any other state with the freeze and thaw, as we all know, those potholes. They can best decide how they can use their road money to fix it here in Michigan. Transportation is huge in our state. The border with Canada, billions of dollars of commerce go across that every day. We need to keep that moving in Michigan with our real-time manufacturing, with our agricultural products that need to get to market. So that would definitely be a priority too. Repeal and replace Obamacare is important, and all of these things I think would be there to help Michigan, and of course that's what I'd fight for in the United States Senate.
Congress is often criticized and in recent years has been accused of not being able to get anything done. It's too polarized. Can you name a couple of things you think Congress does well, and a couple of things you think that they don't do so well that you could be a part of a solution?
Well, obviously they talk about the issues. It's getting the issues done. And, I talk to a lot of voters around Michigan, not only jobs and the economy, but when you get down to it, they just want you to get together and get something done. And I like to think that my experience of being Secretary of State with a Democratic administration and still getting things done, we got the enhanced driver's license, we put services online. I worked with businesses. For example, now you go to a new car dealership, they issue the plate right there at the dealership. You don't have to go back to the Secretary of State's office. Business is good. Government can work with business to get things done. We went to permanent trailer plates. Now all the trucking companies don't have to come in and get their trailers plated. It saved them time. It saved the state time. So there's ways that you can do business and deliver services without, hurting businesses. You can actually make it beneficial for business, beneficial for government, and beneficial for the citizens of our great state.
What's your personal ethical code for operating in public office?
Well, tell the truth is a good place to start, I think. One of the opportunities I've had is to talk to a lot of folks over the 30 years that I've been involved from this community. And, this is where I grew up in Granville, went to Granville High School, Hope College, and had the opportunity to serve as county clerk here. And, just having that trust of the voters, delivering the services, making sure your customers are number one, and you listen to them. Make sure you know what they want and what they need, and making government work for the people. That's what we did as county clerk and as Secretary of State, and we proved it can be done. And the best part of it was, at the Secretary of State's office, we were going through those tough times. If you remember that, those were the dark days of Michigan, the last decade, and I knew we weren't going to have the resources to get things done. So what I did was, as we said, every program that we have, we need to look at it. If it doesn't work, we get rid of it. If it costs too much, we reduce the cost, or we consolidate. We make government work for the people. And we went through every department and did that. We went from 2,100 employees down to 1,500 without laying anyone off. And we actually reduced the operation by over 20%, bricks and mortar. So you can reduce the size of government, still deliver the services, and give good customer service.
What are your key principles of constituent service?
Well, listen to your customer. I think that's very important, and do the best you can with your tax dollars that they give you. Be a good steward of that, and that's what I do at the federal government level. I mean, we need to balance this budget, eliminate the deficit, and reduce the debt. That's just would be priority number one. We cannot leave this to our children and our grandchildren. My daughter just got married last year. I got a house with 4 bedrooms, so I'm excited. Got some options here. So I want to make sure that we leave this place a little bit better. My dad was in business with my grandfather, and business was very important to him, but giving back to the community was also important. And he was very involved in the community, and he taught me that. He said, to leave the place a little bit better than you found it.
In your view, is the U.S. Supreme Court too liberal, too conservative, or just about right?
Well, I'll tell you, in the Senate you have that opportunity to, confirm U.S. Supreme Court justices, and we'll take that up when that time comes.
Do you have a litmus test?
No.
Okay. I'm getting to the end of my questions here.
I thought maybe I'd get a lightning round like the governor did.
You kind of threw me there by not having an answer to that question. Oh, here's the one that we've been asking tonight, and I want to ask your views on same-sex marriage. There was a headline today out of the Supreme Court that they won't be settling those cases, and they sent them back to the circuits. But with 30 states now where it's essentially effectively legal to have a same-sex marriage, do you think the time is for the entire country to just accept and move on, or do you think that needs to be continued to be fought?
I support marriage between one man and one woman, but I believe this should be left up to the states.
Okay, very well. Well, tell me, if you get into office, how are you going to judge success for you personally and for the state of Michigan?
Well, my job is to put Michigan first, and that's why I'm running. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Washington is broken, and now it's trying to break Michigan. Michigan needs good-paying jobs here in the state, so that would be a number one priority. We need to balance the budget. That's a priority, not to leave that to our grandchildren. Repeal and replace Obamacare so we can have the best health care system in the world once again, and then fix Michigan roads. That would definitely be our priority. If we could do all those things in the first year, it'd be great.
Excellent. Well, that's the end of my questions, and thank you again for joining us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Terri Lynn.
Thanks.